just stopped it. But the fact is, he gives me a choice. Do you know what I mean? He gives me a choice. So love is a choice. Love is a choice. Do you know what I mean? So that's what God wanted to do. Yeah.
It's we're born into a broken world where broken people do broken things, and not all of us start at the starting line. Some of us start way back. Anyone that's been raised with sexual abuse, physical abuse, or emotional abuse, normally if they question their parents, well, why did you do this? Then they would normally find there's a history of abuse in one of those three areas quite strongly, and it just comes down the line from one to the other, to the other, to the other. And broken people break people, hurt people, and it just gets worse. And there's and if you've not experienced much of that, then if you went out into the big wide world and just dug a little bit underneath the surface of most people's lives, there's normally an immense amount of brokenness at very, very deep levels for most people. You know what I mean? There's the number of people that are sexualized early through abuse, from other children that have been abused or abusers. When I was 17, which was a long time, I was 17 like 1975. Okay, 1 in 3 girls were sexually abused before the age of 14. That was before things got bad. 1 in 5 boys were sexually abused before they were that age too, and that's completely hidden. The amount of teen suicide, the amount of suicides. Phil, he knows. He knows 7 guys from site who commit suicide. Traders, just in the Gold Coast. Not a word about it. It's a very broken world. And we need a miracle in our hearts to fix us. And when that miracle happens, it's very hard to be quiet about it because it's such a beautiful change. You want it for everybody, because it's the best thing since sliced bread. Because it changed you, it will change anybody, I guess. And so, but there's 2 things that really need to take place. This is what I'd like to talk to everyone about, is for Jesus to do a beautiful change in your heart, he needs a very real heart consent from you to let that happen. A lot of people really struggle to do that because the same steel that they use to steel their life up against life's hurts because of their early hurts becomes the same thing that protects them from giving God that consent to change their own heart. And they need to recognise when a beautiful thing wants to happen to them with God. That's their hope. It's like they've got to recognise salvation when it comes knocking on the door of their heart. And they've got to give consent at that point. They've got to say, I did it. I recognise when he came and called me, and when he does, you'll know it. When he does, I realise this is my chance. This is my chance of out of me and out of my life. And this is when the maker of the universe walks past thousands of people and walks up to you and calls you to himself. It's only because he wants to do a beautiful thing in your life. And then giving consent in your heart and saying, yes. It's a very simple thing, but for some people, it's a very hard thing. But to not do it is the dumbest thing in the world. You know what I mean? You really need a stupid award because because when that best thing passes you by and you don't have that change in your heart, what do you think you're left with? The life you're going to have. Great, more pain, more foolish decisions, more broken, more empty life, more shallow relationships. Great, what a waste of a life, waste of an eternity. And when you give consent to him, this beautiful thing happens in your heart. That's the first thing. And those who have done that, first thing of giving genuine, real consent, give up their rebellion and say, okay, your heart changes. But the next thing you need to do is not just give consent, but believe the truth of what he says about you instead of what this broken, hurting and hurtful world has taught you about you. You've got to let that go. And when you do, it's like this super boost of transformation happens in another whole area of your life. And so you've got this God who, and we'll take a break in just a moment. This is what he does. It's like, he says, now I want you to imagine God is saying to you these things, each of you, and I want you to register how you feel about him saying it to you, right? And he's looking at you, so close your eyes, he's looking at you. And this is what he's saying to you. You are loved. You are my son. You are my daughter. You are fully accepted. You are forgiven. You are embraced. You are favoured by me. You are provided for by me. You are protected by me. You are thought of constantly by me. You are desired by me, valued by me. In my eyes, you are significant. You are important. And all of those things, you are as significant and as loved and as valued and thought of as my son Jesus. And that's what his thoughts are about you. But can you be honest about your reality of what your thoughts are about you and how misaligned you are? And there's two words for all of that. Unnecessary pain. It's one thing, when Jesus says this is who you are, and you choose not to believe it, once you know his thoughts towards you, you've chosen. Therefore, is your pain, are you a victim of your pain, or have you deliberately chosen your pain? Because of your unbelief. Good thought?
Yeah.
Good thought. Now, Judy, here's a good one for you. I'll give you this illustration and then it's time for a cup of tea. You ready? Okay. Now, have you ever heard of false memory syndrome from heart transplant people? Okay. Well, what do they call them? Neuro something or other, where the people that study the brain and the heart and the interrelationship between the two, they found out that the heart has a minor nervous system, which means it has a tiny brain. And so your neurons travel from your main brain down to this little system as part of your heart. So there's this circuit that they do. So if you've got a faulty heart and they give you a new heart from somebody else, they just unplug yours and plug a new one in, then part of those neurons still stuck in that heart little brain system then start to then travel into your own brain. And so heaps of people that have had heart transplants have found that they have changes in their thinking. Some of them, the food they like changes. They might have liked nice cuisine, now they like junk food, you know what I mean? Or they used to not smoke and now they want to smoke, and they used to think of themselves a certain way, now they think of themselves differently. Before they had different aptitudes, now they've got different talents. And so they've got these unusual shifts and changes. And sometimes they can go into depression that they never had before. And they go to counsellors and the counsellors they teach them this. You know, those thoughts you're having, they actually don't belong to you. They belong to the donor patient. So those thoughts are about them, not about you. This is not you. They're just thoughts that are in your head from another person. In a way, when someone becomes God's, he so rewrites them and he so changes them, it's like they're a brand new person. And in a sense, he's wiped away who they really once were by his acceptance and his love, and by who he is, and him making a statement about them. Do you understand? It's like if the emperor passed a presidential pardon on a person and says, they are now my son, well, who's going to argue with that? Do you know what I mean? Okay. You know what I mean? He's rewritten it all. Well, so God's rewritten it all, and so because of that, the thoughts that we have in our head about the person that we thought we once were, they're the thoughts that belong to another person. And God's the counsellor that says, that's how I want you to treat them. They don't belong to you. They belong to a dead person. I've made you a new person. You're now my child. This is who you are. You're loved. You're accepted. You're valuable. You're significant. And you mean everything to me. As much to me as my son Jesus. That's the worth I place on you. That's what I want you to go with. And you've got a choice going with what he says or what you once were. But when you choose this, you shift into it. And there's this new transformation through the transforming of your mind. Good time for a cup of tea.
Can you